It was very insightful, sir, listening to your, insights, and especially that wedding. Of course, of course, of course. That wedding part, in fact, I'll ask questions later on that. But thank you. I have a young panel with me, all big disruptors, and our topic is also disruption as a culture. The best part about this panel is that everyone's name starts with A. It's the first disruption here. I was just noticing that. Let me start with you, Akash is not with us. Aman, let me come to you first. Normally when we talk about disruption, we think of the founder. It's always the founder who is disruptive. But isn't that also a very narrow way of looking at it? Can this definition of disruption also go to the organization? How can founders make the organization disruptive and build a culture and not a person-centric disruption, as we know it?
Well, if you were to ask me, I'd say it should be other way around. The founder who's leading a team should be someone who's someone who will never compromise on professional ethic, work ethic. And it's the team. It's as someone who comes from technology and engineering, you build a team which is, number one, incapable of indecisiveness. It's a team which likes taking decisions. It's a team that likes taking responsibility. At least at Intangles, when we interview people, the foremost thing that we look for is sort of a tenacity to not say no to daunting problem statements. So I think as the founder, as someone who heads analytics and AI, it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm enforcing processes, but it's my team, which is made up of these mavericks who are ready to go the extra step, redefine workflows that I might be enforcing on them, and basically overrun the idea and take decisions. I think that's my take on it. Yeah.
Anvi, if I have to ask you, the same question, how do you define disruption at your individual level, and how do you build a culture of disruption at an organizational level?
I agree with a lot of what he rightly said. He said something about ethics as well. And that's something that I personally really believe in, because my company works in the field of ESG and sustainability. So ethics is at the center of what we do. I think now ethics in general has also become really important, like as a disruptor, because if you look at all startups, they want to be more sustainable. They want to be recognized as being ethical, because that gives them a lot of bonus points with their customers, with their consumers. The companies that treat their employees well build a culture where employees enjoy the work that they're doing. And as he said that employees can't be indecisive, I think it's so important to have employees who understand what you're doing, and employees who can gel with the mission of the company. So I think that together really makes disruption happen.
Right. Well said. Anshita, if you have to answer building culture of disruption, in a newly set up a startup which goes beyond the founder's vision and everybody is a participant in it, what would be your 2 bits on that?
So I feel like it's less about the founder or even the people in your startup, but it's more about the customer base that you're targeting. If that customer base is in a niche segment, you already know that you're doing something disruptive by targeting them, because people often overlook them. In my case, for example, we look at people with curly and wavy hair. They've often been overlooked in the hair care segment. And so for us, the consumer, if they're ready to be disruptive, that's proof for your startup, for the people in your startup, and as a founder that, you can create something disruptive. It really helps if you find the right segment of people.
Arnav?
I think I absolutely agree with what Anshita just mentioned. I think more than the founders, it sort of boils down to, the entire team and also the customer base down and under, because how much can a founder do himself? The vision of whatever you're creating, whatever you're trying to disrupt, it needs to be carried through the entire team. And only then can you sort of really, I mean, we have to all understand what does disruption really mean. We're in a time and place in the world where, being disruptive in business is considered to be cool. And having said that, and I think rightly so, because some of the most talked about entrepreneurs in the world are disruptors and innovators in their own ways. When I hear the word trendsetters, the first thought that enters my mind is fashion. For example, look at some of the most outlandish, crazy outfits that hit the main stages of the biggest fashion shows in the world. I think the trendsetters is basically challenging the masses to think bigger, right? And I don't like to quote big tech innovators as an example, because that thought can somewhat feel unattainable. But look at Elon Musk as an example, what he created with Tesla. His vision to bring electric transportation to the entire world. And when Tesla hit the mainstream media for the first time, I can remember most of the people were saying that how this is going to be a big disaster, why it will fail. But I think the learning out of that is not everyone needs to create something as crazy as Tesla, but having the patience. It's all about patience to go through that cycle of, progression. And especially with I think what the cycle is, that you introduce something new, introduce a new way of doing something rather. Be ready for getting a lot of pushback from people, because inherently humans are they are opposed to change. Nobody can accept change that easily. That's how we're biologically engineered as humans. Then the early risk takers, the early adopters start to kick in, and then it's a slow progression towards the masses that start adopting this new way of doing something. So I feel, yes, that the entire organization needs to carry that. And yeah, that's how I feel.
You raised a very valid point that the word trendsetters was captive of fashion and now has come to startup. Good to see that. I want to come to you, Anvi. In the breadth of your daily complexities of, a whole lot of things that you deal with, and then how do you find time to innovate? So at a granular level, what does innovation look like? Is it like switching off your mobile phone, not talking to people, going to Shimla for 2 days? Or you're working and you find that idea? What does innovation look like at a granular level?
That's a great question. I wish I could take off and go to Shimla every time I needed to think of an idea, but that's not always possible. I think for me, innovation just means learning every day, learning constantly. And in the field that I'm in, since we work in sustainability and we help other companies embrace sustainability, so you need to keep up with all the industry trends constantly. So reading a lot is really important. I think for me, innovation comes a lot from what I learn, from what other people have to say, from meeting people every day that you meet even one person, you learn so much from what they have to say, even 5-minute conversations. Speaking to my team is something that's really rejuvenating to me. That helps me innovate a lot. For me, a lot of the innovations at Ampana have come not from me, but they've come from the ideas of my amazing team members. So I think innovation just means like taking everyone in conjunction together and using everyone's ideas collaboratively and taking your company to higher levels and taking your customers also to higher levels and to meeting the expectations constantly and to raising expectations each time. Thank you.
Aman, how do you find that time to innovate, and what does innovation mean to you at a personal granular level?
It's a very interesting question. Time to innovate. We don't think about that a lot in the startup ecosystem. Unfortunately, startup ecosystems are about superheroes who don't sleep, who don't eat, who just work, which is not really the case.
That's what is made out of. Looks like.
Yeah. So for me, honestly, innovation is a function of two things. As someone who comes from technology, number one, it's a function of sound engineers sitting together and ideating, as she said. About a suite of 25 odd industry changing algorithms and all, and I think I've contributed with about 2. The other 23 come from my team. This also gets me to the whole work from home thing. not a big supporter, because I still believe that good engineering, at least good automobile, good software engineering happens when brilliant engineers sit together, gauge. There's this vibe inside that review room. They gauge what the other person's thinking. They gauge if the other person has an idea, and they hear each other out. And the other thing which is made a big difference for me is, in fact, she said, I over the years learned to dedicatedly take some time out for reading. And this is not essentially reading pertaining to my art. It could be reading pertaining to history. Of late I've been reading about Jahangir's palace, among other things. It comes from a book called The Feast of Roses. So it's about keeping that learning instinct going. With the burden of responsibilities that come with leadership, you end up compromising on that time to continue learning. And the final thing is just writing. I think if you've been thrust into a position of leadership at a younger age, and there are a lot of responsibilities and you're learning from people on the go, it's extremely important to keep writing and keep summarizing what you're going through during your day. So these three things, at least for me, made a big difference.
Anshita?
So see, when it comes to having a product related business, I have to keep looking at the customer again and again and again. And I strongly believe that everything comes from something. So it's not like, the product you make pehli baar banaya. The product does not exist. That's not going to happen in an environment like this. Today, there are thousands of startups. What you make, maybe someone else has made a similar kind of thing, but if you can focus on what your customer needs or what your customer segment is asking for, then that will be innovative in your segment. Again, I don't think that you can really make something new. It's never been done before. Most likely it's been done, but that's not the issue. I think if you can focus on your customer, that is something that a lot of people forget to do because they're more focused on, this is what I want to make.
So I'm sorry. So for you, innovation, like looking around who has curly hair, and then, how does that's a granular level? How do you do it?
See, for me, obviously there are some basic needs I want to fulfill as a founder. When you make a brand, it is often for selfish needs. You're making a product you like, you believe in, you want to put it out there. And of course, you feel a segment exists that is going to buy that product. But when you do research and development, and often you have to, at the granular level, you'll realize that customers may want something different from what you're making currently. And then you have to adapt that into your current product. And I feel that is how you can innovate. And again, I strongly believe you're never going to make something completely unique, but that doesn't mean it's not good.
When it's 10% different, it's a value
There's just
add,
a little bit
course.
of you in it. That's more than enough.
Of course.
I think I absolutely agree with this thought. There's a popular saying that you don't need to do different things. You need to do things differently. And I think at Fire-Boltt, what we're doing, so we make smartwatches for the masses of India. When we first started off in 2015, people used to come and tell me that, what are you doing? Like, this idea is never going to take off. At that point in time, smartwatches didn't even exist. So there were fitness trackers. And my first idea was to embed sensors in shoes, in sneakers. So we wanted to come up with smart shoes as a category. And, it was a wild thought back in the day. And
interesting. That would be interesting.
Yeah. And I think the way we have, seen the market grow over time, we've also learned that innovation is not about, like she said, it's not about doing something absolutely new or out of the box. It's probably, if you can pick on something that works for you and do it differently, in your own way, that's in my terms, that would be called innovation. And innovation doesn't have to be on the product. It can be the way you market it, the way you sell it, the way you're presenting it. It's all, those are all ways of innovating something, right? At a granular level, yes, the way, we're in the hardcore technology segment, technology space. We're constantly working on newer form factors, whether it's coming out with different types of smartwatches with newer functions or, and we are constantly learning from our own consumers. Our consumers are telling us what we need to do, what we need to innovate on next. And, so there is a lot of learning that's coming in from our customers. And obviously we're looking at new trends every day. Our team down and under knows the importance of, thriving on newer set of, features each and every day. And, that's how I think at a granular level, we approach this on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Anvi, so, when a startup is founded and an idea is, out in the market, it is disruptive at that point. But after, say, 6 months, 1 year, there are many other similar startups in the market. So there are two things. One is, does the founder stay open to ideas, and listen to the market forces? Or is there a certain anxiety of a lot of Me Too's around? How do you deal with those situations?
I think, as Anshita said, no product is ever entirely unique. Even when you start out, there can be companies that are very, very similar to what you're doing, and there will be more companies that emerge later. So you're never going to be in a space where there is no competitors. I think it's really important to always be open to new ideas, because there can be people who do things better than you. Then always going to be people who do something better than you. But then that's why I think as a founder, it's important to constantly be innovating and constantly just be aware of how they can make their product better, how they can still have an edge in the industry. If you look at Apple, for example, they've innovated so many different things. They started with the iPad, they ended the iPod. So just, the iPod was one of their first products that came out, and then, they got rid of it eventually, and then it's now replaced by so many different things that they did. If they just stuck to the one thing that they did, it wouldn't have been the kind of company that it is now. So I think it's really important to keep innovating and to be open to change. I think change is really important, and that's what disruption is. So disruption doesn't end when you found your company. Disruption just keeps going as long as the founder is alive, I guess.
Right. Aman, coming to that Apple part, a lot of memes were there on social media the other day. They just said that, it's just tweaking a small thing and yet being called innovation. We can have a separate discussion on it. But Aman, yes, your thoughts on this?
Well, see, again, for someone who comes from technology, I think R&D is a way of life. For anyone who's designing technology, designing engineering products, and again, Apple as an example, right? People talk about the $1 trillion evaluation, but you've also got to know that they also invest the most amount of money on research. So research has to be like an integral part of the organization. And secondarily, your R&D engineers cannot be working in silos. We've seen that extremely talented engineers who are not interfacing with the customer end up delivering innovation that goes nowhere. So if you were to ask me, a founder who's not very nervous about again, as Sir said, as a matter of fact, when you come up with an idea, you think about barrier of entry. It's a very important part. But the moment you're live, 2 customers are consuming the product, at least as it was in our case, diesel engines and monitoring data from trucks and so on, we know that people will follow suit. But what's worked for us is always staying in touch with the customers, and the founders have led by example. We go meet customers who have 5 trucks on the highway somewhere between Kolhapur and Bangalore. We go meet customers like VRL who have 4,000 trucks. But the idea is to stay in touch with your customers and have your R&D and research guys, having a sense of the kind of problems they're trying to solve and the repercussions that their solutions have on the P&L of your customer. Basically, again, on the lines of something that Sir had said. I think that's what gives you the confidence that you are always innovating and innovating in the right direction. So I think that's my take on it.
Anshita,
Ruhail, I want to steer this because it's incremental value add. What would be very interesting is it's being editorially simulcast on multiple sites is to know how you started your journeys. See, we know from your forms, right? At least I know, being a jury member, from your forms about. But it'd be interesting to know very shortly, Anvi, how did you start? Aman, how did you start?
What sparked that idea?
Anshita, how did you start? And Arnav, how did you start? So that would be interesting. And why this area? Why did you choose this particular area? Of course, Anshita, I would never be able to do curls and,
that can be a disruption.
Yes. So, yeah. Yeah. And on a serious note, Anvi, why did you choose to do what you are doing today, and share with the audience what it is.
Sure, that's a great question. I worked at the Albright Stonebridge Group in the US in Washington, D.C. for a while, and I really enjoyed the experience. They're a business consultancy, and I worked with the sustainability team there. They work with some of the largest corporates in the world, and they help them embrace sustainability. And when I came back to India, I realized that there really wasn't anything like that offered in India. There weren't any services that helped companies embrace sustainability. And I saw that sustainability had become such a big buzzword in India. Even small startups, they wanted to become more sustainable. They wanted to have, they wanted to have all the big ESG ratings. They wanted to have all the news articles come out about them being sustainable, how well they treat their employees. But they didn't really know how to. The bigger companies, they could approach large consultancy firms, they could approach BCG, McKinsey. But when you look at MSMEs or emerging startups, they're not going to be able to afford the large consulting firms. And that's when Ampana Life came in. We started out as a small consultancy that provides sustainability consulting, diversity and inclusion consulting, and ESG consulting for MSMEs and emerging startups.
Sure. This profession actually came to me by chance. I was working as a decision data scientist with a very large investment banking firm. I'd interned there and I was about to join them. As a part of my final year project, I was developing technology which could extract data from passenger vehicles. And things were not very fascinating at that point in time because the whole idea at our end is to collect data from vehicles and generate reports around vehicle health, engine health specifically. Passenger vehicles are very well kept. At least I service my vehicle regularly and there's not a lot to diagnose when it comes to the everyday passenger vehicle. But one fine day, someone said, why don't you go connect to a truck? And there's a huge automotive manufacturing hub in Pune called Chakan, which has about 5 very large automotive manufacturing units. We found a truck. Someone was, generous enough to allow us to connect our technology, and we found about 4 faults. And we took those faults to the nearest dealership, and we told them, what happens when a truck has these faults. And that guy told us, sir, it's about 6% fuel economy detrimental, but 6% deficit in fuel economy. Now, when we took that number to the owner of the fleet, we realized that 6% fuel economy translates to about 45,000 rupees per month. And it started from there. We realized that remote maintenance, remote vehicle health monitoring has a lot of opportunity when it comes to commercial trucking and bus operations as well. From there on, we started developing our own hardware, our own analytics. In about the first 2 years, went to about 3,000 odd vehicles. Then we started exploring use cases such as fuel theft. As of today, our platform tracks about 120,000 liters of fuel theft and mitigates about 500,000 liters of fuel theft on a daily basis. So that's how the professions come to us. But I think why I resonate with this is fundamentally because it's a job that it couples machine learning and AI with physics, which have always been areas of interest for me. And the second bit, again, in lines of what she said, it's also something that contributes to sustainability. We are at this point in time saving about 500,000 tons in carbon emissions on a monthly basis, simply by virtue of vehicle upkeep and fuel monitoring and emissions monitoring and so on.
So I think my story is quite obvious when you look at me, but I started Fix My Curls back in 2019 simply because there were basically no curly hair products available. And even the ones that were available, when you go out and look for sunscreen, supposedly, there are thousands of options to choose from. But in curly hair, there were maybe 2 options to choose from back in 2019. And some of them would be so expensive. I mean, spending like 8,000 rupees on your hair when you don't even know if it'll work or not makes it really difficult. I know they know how I feel. So I thought, why not create the products myself? And of course, this was disruptive because curly hair is often overlooked and you're often told to just straighten them. That's the easiest solution, but it's really not. It's not the long-term solution and it's not a good one. So yeah, I started making curly hair products back in 2019. And today we have a huge community of people that agreeably have had the same issue their whole lives. So that in simple, that's why.
Pardon my ignorance. Is there a large addressable market for this?
I always get this question. I wish there was data for India in specific, but I can tell you that 60% of the global population has textured hair. So 60%. Yeah.
Good.
Wow. Okay, so very interesting story. When I started off, I actually used to play lawn tennis at an international level for about 16 years. I've represented India in the Juniors Davis Cup and all. So I was an athlete for a very long time. And I sort of always had this interest in technology and wanted to come up with a problem statement where, we could help athletes become track their, fitness data better. And it all started in 2015. Prior to that, I had experience with my father. My father was instrumental in bringing Nike to the country back in the day. And for the first 3-4 years, a lot of on the ground, learnings in terms of manufacturing, retail, pretty much everything to learn in a business. In 2015, when me and my elder sister Ayushi, we co-founded Bolt. The idea was to come up with health and fitness solutions that can help the common man and also the athletes track and infer the data that's collected from the sensors better. And at that point in time, there were very limited players in this category, the Fitbit or an MI, very less homegrown Indian brands. So the idea was sort of revolutionary in my mind that, let's create, a health and fitness oriented brand. And that's how it all started. First 3 to 4 years, I would say my journey was full of rejections because, it was the proof of concept took a lot of time. It took us a lot of time developing the entire hardware solution, the software solution. We were very futuristic in our thoughts. We were trying to sort of, amalgamate both, technology and health and fitness in a very unique way. We were using AI and machine learning to give automated coaching based on the data that's collected from your wearables. So pretty much giving you coaching on, your sleeping patterns, how you're running, how your diet is affecting your sleep, and so on and so forth, right? So it was a complete ecosystem around health and fitness, but it was way ahead of its time. And there was a very niche market for it. People didn't understand what are wearables, why do they need it. So the first 4-5 years, pretty much rejection from all sides, whether it was investors, customers, partners, pretty much everyone. In 2019, we re-christened the brand to be and I think during the pandemic time, there was a sudden surge in the awareness of why health and fitness is so important, why and how can wearables actually help you. And in 2020 is when we launched our first smartwatch, and it was an industry to track your SpO2, and that was the breaking point for us, because from there, in the last 2 years has been phenomenal. We've seen a rapid growth. The industry has become so big. I think in 2020 the overall market size was about 4 million units. This year it's anticipated to cross 33 million units. So in less than 2 years we've seen that jump. And Fire-Boltt as a brand, from nowhere, it is today India's #1 smartwatch brand, and globally we are ranked #4. So after Apple, Samsung, Huawei, it's Fire-Boltt today, and it's a big achievement not only for us but for the entire country, because we've outbeaten China for the first time globally. So that's the journey. Yes.
And Arnav, clearly Bolt comes from Hussein Bolt or something else?
No, I think Bolt, the name just resonated with energy, all of that. But yeah, like Hussein Bolt,
Sports people like.
Yeah.
Good. I also want to ask you, I know Ruhail is moderating.
We have 1 minute. We can have one.
So, I want the conversations to be real. We do 300. This is our youngest forum, and also about young people. People like me, of course. But jokes apart, we glamorize entrepreneurship. And there's a lot of failure. I want you to talk about some moments where you had doubts, I would say, where you had to rethink, you had to I wouldn't say it was a failure. I don't believe anything is a failure. Everything is an experience, you learn from it and you become better. So give me a sense, and we can start this time with Anvi and then go down, or you are like so lucky that everything smooth highway, no bumps.
Thank you for the great questions. It's never smooth at all. I'm 20 years old. I'm still studying. So when I started, when I started the company, I was 19 years old. And it was really hard for people to take me seriously because everyone that I work with is much older than me. My team members are much older than me. Because I also, I'm still in college. I'm studying in Chicago, and for me to take our time for school, because I also take that seriously, and to take our time for this, because I know there's so much at stake. That's really challenging every single day. But this is something that I really, really feel very passionate about. So I think. I'm grateful that people do take me seriously, even though I'm young. I think it just takes some time to prove yourself. Once I was in conversation with a startup founder, and I emailed him introducing myself, and then we chatted back and forth over a few emails, and then later, when we met over WhatsApp call, he was like, "Oh my God, you sound so young." And he said, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 20 years old." And he was like, "I'm really apprehensive about working with someone who's so young." But I think it's not about age; it's about what you can put on the table. And then he was more convinced later because he saw that my team members were a lot older than I am. So that's always a challenge. Convincing people to work with me, even though I'm quite young.
And I must say, I don't know Anvi except from her form. And one day, 20 days or 3 weeks back, me saying, "I want to know where, if I'm making it," and we don't tell it, except, so I said, yes. I called Chetan, asked, I replied to almost every mail. And, I must say that, being young is an advantage, and being young people are more serious and more driven. I don't want to make generalization, but, age is not a disadvantage. It is an advantage. Aman?
So I come from the trucking industry. So glamour is non-existent. In terms of failure, the first design spec that went live was V7.1, which means that there were at least 40 odd designs which didn't work. In trucks with truck drivers. There was a point in time wherein I could, and then that just me, the entire founding team. There was a point in time wherein the Pune-Hubli route started feeling like home, more than home. Developing technology, as he said, we had to build everything bottom up, which means that at this point in time, you consider countries like China, consider countries like Israel. We at this point in time as Intangles Lab in India are the only bottom up telematics technology stack wherein we build our own hardware, fully designed, integrated in India. The cloud integration backbone is built by us, and the analytics is also built by us. So that's the first of a kind. It doesn't come easy. There were failures on the hardware. Once you start designing algorithms, you got to test them out, as I said, in rugged conditions, in trucks, buses. And it's not just trucks and buses, it's trucks and buses in geographies. We've had to run tests in Calcutta. We've had to run tests in Rajasthan, because you design a hardware which is going to be on a truck, and inside that truck cabin, right, you'll have temperatures as high as 48 degrees Celsius. So we've actually had instances of components melting down. So the whole point I'm drawing here is developing hardware, developing technology is tough. But what keeps you going is if it is something that appeals to you. As I said, physics and AI is something that I was always really into, so I kept going. And the other bit that I've learned over the ages is when you do fail, you get to be slightly pissed off. It's about basically channeling that anger. I mean, that's worked very well for me, at least for me and my founders. That when there were times wherein, we felt like just throwing the boards away and just going back to Pune, about 700 kilometers back from Hubli. But more often than not, when we were pissed off, we got back to work again. It was basically channeling that anger in a way that kind of way worked for us pretty well.
How you asked me the question about market size, that has been used against my idea by 15 plus VCs. I mean, I think that is the biggest rejection I've faced, is when your hair type is still not seen, despite, us having thousands and thousands of testimonials of real people they have curly hair. Why do you think the salon business is thriving? Everybody goes to get a blow dryer, they get their hair straightened. Keratin is so big. It's big because there's frizz. Frizz is texture. So curly hair exists. But for us, when you go into the world of VCs, I think that's where I face the most rejection, because you get to hear that they don't believe in your business simply because they don't see it. Even though the numbers are out there, the stats are that 60% of the global population has curly hair, but because India mein data nahi hai, we don't believe in it. So I think that's the rejection I've had to come to terms with, is that it'll take some time, and proving them wrong is the only way. Then only it'll happen.
Next opportunity. Rejection is redirection. I don't believe in rejection.
And I've realized that.
And if you don't raise money, you own your company, it sounds a little old fashioned. You don't have to raise money. If you can make profit,
definitely.
You don't have to raise money. We made raising money, my journalist colleagues are there. How much money have you raised? That's become.
Definitely. Yeah.
How much money have you made should be the. But I think we've glamorized raising capital too much.
No, I feel like so many publications write about you as a founder because you haven't raised any money.
I agree with you.
And I agree with you. Arey, but if we've grown 5x from last year to this year, does that not count for something? We've done it on our own. We're bootstrapped. But anyway, I'm not here to complain. Just saying, rejection is definitely there. It's not fun.
Yeah. I think very insightful. I just want to say,
recently was the 9/11 anniversary. And I must tell you, I was with the MD of NASDAQ yesterday, the friend of mine. And, he was supposed to be in that building when that happened. And he got late. He got saved.
Oh my God.
It's a personal story, right? So, if you've not got funding, there must be, I have an astrologer friend, young friend. Again, to be a 32-year-old astrologer is not qualification. But the fact is, he's told me stories after stories. He told me a story about a temple, which someday I'll write in a column. How, there is God there and there is a thief. And, he's told me God helps certain people and doesn't help certain people, the lady. And then he explains why God is doing what God is. He's actually helping all four. So it may not seem at that time that not getting funding may be actually good for you.
Who knows? Maybe I'll look back at these rejections.
Aditya's looking at me. Aditya will get your curly hair done. Don't worry. The last comment from.
Yeah. No, I think very insightful. And I sort of agree that, it's all about introspection, whether you need funding also or not. The moment you are profitable, you might look the other way and say that I'm happy to sort of reinvest into my business and take it to new heights on our own. And then VCs are behind you. So point is that, like, even in my journey in the first 5 years, like I mentioned, it was all about failure. And to be very honest with everyone here, I don't think I would have reached here if it wasn't for those 5 years of failure. Because that was the time when I learned pretty much everything, and that learning is invaluable till date, and it'll be with me for the rest of my life, because that's what has taught us how to manage your hardships. There will never be a time where in one go you become successful. In very unlikely cases will that happen. So I think the key learning here is that you have to learn from your failures. And for me, I think the first 5 years, there were so many points where I had almost given up. We had a big team. We were supporting big salaries going out every month, no money coming in, no revenue coming into the company. And those were the days where you question yourself that, are you on the right path? But if you believe in your own vision and you kind of stay at it, there will be those spring summer days, and I think you just have to keep at it. And that's what at Fire-Boltt we've managed to do. That we have struggled for the first 5 years. People don't necessarily see that, but now touch wood, I think in the last 2 years we've risen from bottoms up, and now we are so strong internally that we know that even if we're not looking out for VC money to come in, we are scaling up on our own. We're bootstrapped, and we're proud to be bootstrapped. And probably in the years to come, that will still remain the case. Yeah.
Thank you. Real conversations, real stories here. Can we have a round of applause for all of my panelists?